as informal as we can. My intention here is to give you what you need to answer the questions that other people may have around business agility and sort of around what we're talking about in general. Now, I have some slides, but slides are boring. So we'll use the slides when we need to, but I'm not going to rely on them for the entire session. So I am going to, however, ask, and I won't have a poll or whatever else, but I'll just ask for a show of hands. So just raise your hand. Who here has actually seen or read the latest, as in the 2022 Business Agility Report? And it's okay if you haven't. Sandeep has, obviously. And a couple. All right. So for those of you who have not, I will share a little bit of background information as well as what we found, and then we'll go into a little bit more about the implications. My request is that if you have a question, please ask it straight away. Put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A with whatever mechanism you prefer. My intention is to try and address the questions as they come up. There will be some time at the end for any other additional Q&A. But if you have a question at a particular point in time, chances are somebody else has the same or a similar question. So if you don't ask it, doesn't guarantee it'll get answered, and you will forever wonder what the answer was. Well, until tomorrow when you forget and think about something else. But we'll try and keep this, just ask your questions. If we go off on a tangent, we'll go off on a tangent. We'll have some fun together. Let me, however, start by coming, and this is where I will share, because for those of you who have not seen the Business Agility Report, let me just explain what it is that we are talking about. So there we go. Let me start with basically what is business agility. So our definition, the industry definition, is that business agility is a set of organizational capabilities, behaviors, and ways of working. It is not practices, it is not systems, it is not frameworks, it's not what you do, but rather how you act. That is what creates agility or business agility. The frameworks, the systems, the practices enable agility, but there are thousands of them. But it's these behaviors, capabilities, and ways of working that affords an organization, your organization, the freedom, the flexibility, and the resilience to achieve its purpose. Let's be clear. You may well be able to serve your customers to achieve your purpose today. But are you prepared for, are you able to continue to serve your customer, continue to deliver value when your customers change, when the demands of your customers change, when there is a global pandemic, when there is economic uncertainty, when your competitor comes out with a better product, right? How quickly, how well are you able to continue serving your customers no matter what the future brings? It's those magic 6 words at the end that really define what business agility means. You have an ability. You wouldn't be in business today if you didn't know how to serve today's customers. But unless you can serve tomorrow's customers and the customers after that, you won't be in existence for 5 years or 10. I'm going to be blunt. Companies need to earn the right to exist. You don't exist as an organization because it's always meant to be. Everything has an end. A person's life, a relationship, or a business. And that's not a sad thing. That's the natural state. But things shouldn't end before their time. And that's where the key around business agility is. You need to be able to serve your customers to achieve your purpose. Now, I'm talking quite negative here, but this is actually not about survival. One of the big mistakes that organizations often make is they look at business agility as a way of surviving when things change. The reality is anyone can survive. Survival is easy. The question is, can you thrive? Are you able to take change and opportunity and turn it to your advantage? To make uncertainty brings new opportunities, new ways of better serving your customers. And again, this is the future. 10 years ago, if I'd walked into a bank and said, and I tried, if I said, let's create an agile organization, I would have been kicked out of the room. I wouldn't have been allowed in the room in the first place. But today, every bank is trying to adopt some form of business agility. Some not. Some are doing it quite well, others are not. But they're seeing it as a necessity for not survival, but to be highly competitive in a very dynamic and a very fast-moving market. You look at a bank, and I'll just use banks as an example. If you look at who their competitors were 10 years ago, their competitors were the other banks. Right? DBS was afraid of Standard Chartered, or not afraid, but they would have ranked Standard Chartered and Barclays as competitors. Wells Fargo would have ranked Chase. It would have ranked the other American banks, and so on and so forth. Today, who's the competitor to a bank? Alibaba, Amazon, Apple. These are the competitors to banks, and they weren't competitors 10 years ago. They weren't even in the same industry 10 years ago. And that's kind of where this concept of no matter what the future brings, this is why it's so important. It's why you, as change agents and leaders in your organizations, need to see change, uncertainty, unpredictability, ambiguity. You need to see this as your competitive advantage. Anything less, well, you won't be in existence in 5 years' time. That's business agility in a bit of a rant, a bit of a nutshell. That's what we're talking about. So for your reference, and this is where I'll stop sharing for a bit, I run the Business Agility Institute, as Sandeep very kindly introduced. We are a global advocacy, a fiercely independent global advocacy and research organizations. For your references, we do not do training, we do not do consulting. Our focus is on advocating for and showing organizations how business agility is important for them and how they might bring it about. Our research covers everything from employee engagement to customer satisfaction and customer engagement. It covers things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Business Agility Report is an annual report that we publish that is an industry trend analysis. What we are looking at is who's doing this and how are they doing it and how are they going? This report is intended not to tell you how to do things, but just to give you a snapshot of what the market is doing, what your competitors are doing, and maybe give you a little bit of motivation to go, we need to be a little bit better because our competitors are better. The market is doing better than we are. And that's not a good thing, not for you. So, again, for those who have not seen the Business Agility Report, this is, as I said, it's industry trend analysis. We look at a number of different factors. I'm going to talk through some of these factors, But again, I want it to be interactive, and I don't particularly want this to be me just presenting something that you can read. I am going to take a moment and just go through some of the key points. Aha, but there is a question. And thank you from LinkedIn Live. How do you convince the leadership that business agility is the way to go? Oh God, that is a very good question. It's a good question because it's a very hard question to answer, because there are multiple answers. Now, when I was a consultant, I would have said, it depends, because it depends is a good consulting answer, because it does depend. It depends on so many different factors. But you know what? I'm not a consultant anymore, so I'm going to actually give you some answers. Number one, you cannot convince someone to do something they don't want to do. Now, this isn't about business agility. This is. Let me take a step back. There's a whole bunch of sciences and research around human motivation, and how do you motivate and instill ideas in individuals. Most of it comes down to a couple of simple rules. Number one, motivation is highly intrinsic, internal. Right? So you can use extrinsic punishment and rewards to try and make people do something you want them to do. But anyone here who has children knows that it is much easier to get them to do something that they want to do than it is to get them to do something, than to punish them or cajole them or reward them to do something that they don't. So the trick when it comes to things like convincing leadership that business agility is the way to go is to find the link between business agility and what they already want to do, the ways that they already act. What is it that motivates them? Are they motivated by status? Are they motivated by power? Are they motivated by community and collaboration and creating those connections, like social contact? What is it that moves these leaders? And each leader is moved by different things, and your job is to figure out what motivates your leaders, and then to figure out how to link business agility and the change that we need to create in those organizations with what motivates those leaders. Let me share something which I think might also help. So this is a bit off topic, but I think it's really important. So this is actually in the business agility report. So in 2019, we were approached by a government to create an organizational certification. Now, a certified agile organization, which would involve us studying how companies operate really deeply. Now, the challenge with that is agility is hard to quantify. How do you know you're doing it well? And we had data, but nothing to that degree. So after a couple of false starts, we realized that the way to observe agility, to measure agility in an organization, is through behaviors, how people are acting, because behaviors are observable. And that actually goes to the definition. Business agility is a set of organizational capabilities, behaviors, and ways of working. Now, as a research organization, we have data. So we did, as part of this modeling process, we looked at over, at the time, 1,300 organizations. It's now up to over 1,600. And we looked at what behaviors were they expressing and how. And so we identified a set of 84 unique behaviors for business agility. Now, that's a lot. And the problem with behavior, the problem with something like 84, yes, it's important because we're talking about an entire company, a complex adaptive system with intricate moving parts. So yes, the model is going to be complex. So it took us about 9 months to actually create this behavioral model. It took us about 18 months to figure out how to communicate this behavioral model. Now, this is where what I'm showing on the screen here comes into play, which are the business agility capabilities. This was our aha moment when we realized that we had to stop talking about agility as the thing that you wanted. And Harika, to your question, you don't want to convince your leaders that business agility is the way to go. Business agility is a pathway. It's the journey, right? The question is, what destination do your leaders want? And what destination do all of you, do your organizations want? Now, I use the metaphor of going to the gym. I don't enjoy going to the gym. It's not something that I look forward to. When I go to the gym, I go to the gym not because I want to, but because I want what the gym does for me. Strength, speed, stamina, fitness, health. The capabilities, the new capabilities that I get as a person by going through and doing all of those painful and boring exercises at the gym. When we looked at all these organizations, we looked at what capabilities were they developing by going through a business agility journey. We identified 18 of them. There are, and this is our language and our groupings, but those capabilities under the engaged culture domain, the ability to cultivate a learning organization, right? To continuously learn, to experiment and improve. The ability to engage transparently and courageously, whether you're a leader or an individual, you're sharing information, you're being transparent about what's working and what's not. You're being transparent about backlogs and how long something's going to take. The ability to embed psychological safety. Now, this is foundational. You can't have agility if you don't have psychological safety. The ability to act as one. The ability to create a culture where all of your employees, thousands and thousands of people, are working towards a common purpose. Doesn't matter how big your organization is, if you're all working in opposite directions, you're not going anywhere. Those capabilities under responsive customer centricity refer to those that are about how you serve your customers or citizens or like however you define what a customer is. Can you fiercely champion the customer? If someone has to make a decision between what's right for the company and what's right for the customer, can they choose what's right for the customer? Or are they incentivized to choose what's right for the company, which unfortunately is it's a short-term perspective, because what's right for the customer is usually right in the long term. Do you have the ability to sense and respond proactively? And to integrate diverse ideas, to take ideas from anywhere in the organization, from your customers, from your competitors, from other industries, and bring them into your organizations for your customers' benefit. Those under the people first leadership domain, these are the capabilities that relate to how leaders work. Do you have or do you want the ability to foster authentic relationships where leaders are respected, not because they're experts in their field, but because of the human connection that they create with their peers and the people in the organization? Can you empower with accountability? Empowerment, delegation is something that organizations are investing in, but you can't delegate to teams that can't take ownership. And too many organizations invest in training leaders how to delegate, but not teaching people how to take ownership. Do you have the ability to realize people's potential, right? To develop people with the skills they need, not just today, but the skills they'll need tomorrow. Those capabilities under flexible operations. This relates to governance, corporate governance. Very boring, but fundamentally important. Deming back in the 80s said, a bad system will beat a good person every time. And he's right. We ask for a culture of innovation, a culture of collaboration, and then we make the processes that you go through bureaucratic and slow, with handoffs and approvals every step of the way. So we expect collaboration, but then the systems undermine that. We expect innovation, but the systems undermine that. It just doesn't work. And that could be about strategic agility, about how you fund work, about structural agility, and of course the ability to balance governance and risk. And lastly, those capabilities under the value-based delivery domain. That relates to, are you delivering the right work in the right way to the right people at the right time? And all those capabilities, my favorite is prioritize, 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 because it's something that you have to do and keep doing. And organizations really struggle at this. And I'll be blunt, like that one is actually the weakest capability in our organization. Right? That's our constraint. That's what we're learning to get better at the moment. Globally, and again, we model companies, we study companies all over the world. Balance, governance, and risk and funds work dynamically are by far the weakest capabilities for most organizations. Embed psychological safety is, or foster authentic relationships, are generally the two strongest capabilities. Again, these are the two strongest capabilities for most organizations today. And again, we have those, I have the data because we've done these profiles on numerous organizations. Now, I'm slightly off topic because this isn't directly in the business agility report, but what I will say is that when we actually build the business agility report, it's around these capabilities. And when we ask questions around what organizations are doing well, we're actually looking at these capabilities. And that's a big part around understanding this. I think will go a long way to each of you not only understanding what it is we talk about in the business agility report, but just understanding how you bring about business agility in your organizations or your client organizations. And Harika, I know I've spent like a good 15, 20 minutes answering what should have been a simple question, but it's a very good and important question, and it is fundamental to pretty much every organization that's out there today. Fanny, just very quickly, because I do want to get on with the report. I'll just give you a real example about why Alibaba and Amazon and Apple are competitors, or why the banks see them as competitors. It's because there's a couple of reasons. The first reason is that the barrier to entry to a lot of these traditional businesses have come down. Fintechs, there are thousands of fintechs now. And so it used to be that I used to live in Singapore. And living in Singapore, half of Singapore are expats. They're sending money home to Australia, to India, to the Philippines. And 10 years ago, you used the banks, use DBS or somebody else. Then around 2000 and I don't know, 12, 13, 14, the international remittance fintechs started to emerge. And now suddenly you're able, like, these are small organizations. They do one thing, but they do it cheaper, better, and faster than the big banks. Or at least they did at the time. The banks have caught up. But it meant that within 6 months, right, faster than any bank was able to respond, because banks take years to adapt. Right? In months, they had lost an entire product line because nobody or very few people were using the banks for international remittance. Right? That was now all going through Wise or Paytm and a few others. Right? So there was just really no reason to use the banks. They were more expensive. They were a pain in the ass. Not good. And so these fintechs and the big tech companies are, the fear isn't that they're going to be a better bank. The fear is that they will offer a service that will meet the customer's needs better, faster, cheaper than the banks can do right now. And that's why every bank is doing something around business agility, because it started about being afraid, which is a bad reason to do it. Now it really is becoming more about being strategic, which is probably the better reason to do it. But yeah, the banks are all doing this. So let's talk about the business agility report. I'm still sorry. I just realized I thought I'd stop sharing. So there are three. Sandeep asked at the beginning was the question? It was, are there outcomes? Does business agility help drive business outcomes? And I said I shouldn't answer because I know the answer. The answer is yes. And specifically, again, from like hundreds, like thousands of organizations who have participated in this research and other research, there are three classes of business outcome that organizations report having improved. The first class is around just general organizational agility or adaptiveness. Organizations say we're doing work better. Our ways of working, like people are enjoying it more. People are like we're getting higher quality work being produced. People are saying they're better able to respond to change. Like demands, like the demands on the organization aren't slowing down, but an organization's ability to respond to those demands go up. Now, those are the obvious ones, because like those are the benefits to agility. That agility is like, it's in the name. When you say I have greater agility, the assumption is that yes, you can do these things. Right? So the fact that they're improved outcomes, that's obvious. Perhaps less obvious, improved commercial outcomes. Organizations that go down this path and reach a level of maturity report achieving higher revenue, greater sales, better product market fit when it comes to new products or upgraded or like changes to products, higher customer satisfaction, and larger market share. So even though I say that the purpose of business agility is to achieve your purpose, and that your purpose isn't necessarily to make money, but rather to serve your customer, the reality is that business agility does help you make more money, because you're producing a product or a service, or you're serving your customer better, or you're serving more customers, or you're serving a new type of customer, that like a new market segment that wasn't open to you before, because you have that adaptability, that agility. The last form of, the last benefit is around workforce engagement. And so these are around employee satisfaction, employee engagement, all that kind of thing. And let me actually, I'm just going to jump to one of the things that we did in this year's report that we haven't done in the past. We compared business agility ratings to Glassdoor ratings. Now, one of the things I'm going to ask at some point during this call, I'm going to ask you to take the business agility survey for the 2023 report. I'll be very clear. We will ask you for company name, but we only use that to do things like this. Compare against Amazon, to compare against Glassdoor, to or to link results from multiple companies into the same, so that we know what that company looks like. We do not share that information. So to be clear, the survey is not anonymous, but it is anonymized. Obviously, if you are concerned, you're welcome to just use a fake name and it just means that we are unable to link anything. But if you are able to share the company name, we can use that, again, completely anonymized, to look these things up. But what did we find? We found that there was a very clear positive trend between every Glassdoor stat and business agility. Now, obviously, not every company has Glassdoor ratings, and we excluded companies with like less than 5 Glassdoor ratings, and the whole bunch of like data integrity checks that went through this. But for those that had more than 5 ratings, and we actually could match company names and all that kind of thing. Not only did Glassdoor rating increase basically linearly with business agility, how likely an organization was to recommend it to a friend, how likely they were to approve of the CEO, all had a positive trend between business agility and effectively how good an employee felt their organization was. Now, while it's not a perfect measure, those Glassdoor ratings are a proxy for employee engagement. Now, there are other factors to employee engagement. Anyone here who is from HR is probably cursing me right now because I'm highly simplifying it. But as a proxy for employee engagement, we can say that agile organizations have higher engagement scores. This is a good thing, because obviously you want higher engagement scores. We know from other research that, not in this report, but other research that we've done, that the greater the agility, the lower the attrition, right? Or the higher the retention, whichever way you want to look at it. So people stay in the organization longer. We know that they generally approve of their managers more than in organizations that don't have agility. Again, if you think about the capabilities that agility brings, there are true leadership capabilities that going down a business agility path brings to an organization. So I would hope that an organization that goes down business agility has higher regard of their leaders. And we have data to say that they do. That's how we know that those are linked, right? Because we can see it in the numbers. So when we look at employee engagement scores and we look at the benefits of business agility, we can say very clearly, there it is, sorry, that workforce engagement are some of the key benefits that organizations are seeing by adopting business agility. Now, I have some caveats, and it's not all good news. So I'm going to give you the bad news in a little bit, but let me just pause there and see, are there any other questions on LinkedIn or Sandeep? Any questions from your side?
So I think the one point that we were kind of, always looking at, because there is no direct correlation that, we were able to establish with the commercial business outcomes. And this is an area where I think a lot of people, because tangible ROI for business agility is something that, we get asked quite a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be your response to that, Ivan?
So we can say that there is a tangible ROI to business agility, that there are commercial benefits. From a science, like if I take a pure science perspective, one of the problems with any kind of social research, which this is a form of social science, especially looking at companies, is that a company is a complex adaptive system. So the number of variables at play, or it's uncalculable. So to say with a degree of absolute confidence that this adopting business agility will lead to this business outcome is impossible to say, because there are so many other variables. Right? the market, and just simply, it could just be like, yes, we adopted business agility, but our profit went down. But your competitor's profit went down 7%, your profit went down 5%. All right, so there are so many different moving parts to this. So it is very hard to say with a degree of certainty. What we can say is those organizations that rate higher in terms of business agility have, on average, higher economic, or the commercial outcomes, I should say, in terms of their speed to market, customer satisfaction, market share, and achievement of their business outcomes. Again, we know that from the stats. That much we can say. But more broadly than that, it is quite difficult to go just because of all those moving parts. We are working on a study at the moment that is looking really quantifiably. We actually have a control company and a company that's running the experiment. So there's a few, and they're in the same industry, in the same region, but and we're doing this in partnership with the university. So this is one that it will take like 3 years before this study is complete. But even there, there are so many variables to control for. It's really difficult. So on average, higher agility equals higher commercial outcomes. Yes, I can say that with confidence. More specifically than that, very hard to say.
Perfect. Okay, I think there is one more question from Vaishali. She's asking, how do you see business agility in telecom industry? Which telecom industries do you see going towards business agility?
So let me do two things. So let me share my screen. So I'm going to jump to a different slide. So obviously, one of the things that we ask is each company, each response in the Business Agility Report survey, we ask for their industry. Now, this is the top 3 industries in regards to business agility globally. This isn't segmented by region. This is excluding industries with less than 10 responses. So I think, for example, I think manufacturing came out quite high, but we only had like 7 or 8 responses from manufacturing. So just from a data standpoint, it's too much uncertainty in that response. But telecommunications comes out as the 3rd highest industry globally. Professional services or consulting firms comes out highest. That's not a surprise. Interestingly, so large telecommunications. Can everyone see the screen?
Yeah, Vaishali is saying she can't see the screen. So.
All right. Well, okay. So I'm glad you can. Small small professional services firms score incredibly highly, and that's not a surprise. Like, people often become consultants because they want to be on the bleeding edge, and so the smaller firms like work in this way. The larger ones, we're talking like the hundreds of thousands of people, score really badly. But that's more a factor of size than anything else. So once we factor in for size, professional services does come out really highly. Technology firms comes out 2nd. Again, not a huge surprise, because where did agile start? In technology. So those tech firms who have done agile for 15, 20 years have been doing business agility for 8 to 10. And so they are currently the 2nd highest. Now, professional services and technology have always been 1 and 2. Every year we've run this, they've always been 1 and 2. Number 3 has changed in different years. I think last year was manufacturing. The year before that was financial services. So there's some variance in that in that like who's 3, 4, 5 kind of thing. But telecommunications firms come out good. Now, let me be clear about something. This is classed as literally just good, not great. Just because they're the third industry, the third slowest snail, oh sorry, the third fastest snail is still a snail. So yes, telcos are investing in this. They're getting better at things like psychological safety. They're getting better at things in terms of developing delegation and empowerment amongst their teams. But there is a long way to go. When we do profiles of telecommunications firms, things like governance are always incredibly weak. Organizational systems are generally highly bureaucratic and not just unagile, anti-agile. And we see this all the time. And telcos are really, really bad at this when it comes to governance. In fact, so is financial services and mainly older traditional organizations. Let me give you an example. I used to work for a consulting firm where I met Sandeep, IBM, many years ago. Sandeep, you probably remember the travel policy.
Yeah.
It boiled down to 2 rules. Like, now, don't get me wrong, it was like this.
Yeah.
It was complicated and thick, but it boiled down to buy the cheapest fare and get your manager's approval before you travel. Not unusual. That's pretty standard. That's kind of what most organizations' travel policy was. But I was a senior gent. My boss looked after the global practice. I sometimes, and here's the thing, in Q4, you had to get the country manager's approval. That was even worse. So I sometimes got approval to travel the day before I had to travel. I couldn't buy a ticket till then. So think of it this way. This policy designed to save this organization money ended up costing them 10 or 3 to 4 times what it should have. Because here's the thing, I never once, not once, was I declined to travel. So I was trustworthy, but the systems of the organization were designed not to trust. And so whilst I was trustworthy, I was not trusted by the systems, at least. My manager trusted me. But let's compare that to Netflix. Do you know what Netflix's travel policy is? It's 5 words. Act in Netflix's best interest. Literally. Now, they're not stupid. You buy a business class or a first class flight that's unnecessary, you're going to get called into your manager's office because they're going to get a ping to say, well, Sandeep just bought a $10,000 flight on the company credit card. It's going to, Sandeep, can we have a chat, please? Because there's something a bit off here. Now, Sandeep's done one of 3 things. 1, he did the right thing. It's an important meeting. It's the only flight that's available. And if he'd waited for approval, if this was an approval-based system, by the time I gave him approval, there would be no flights. So you know what, Sandeep, thank you very much. You did the right thing. Yeah, sure, it was expensive, but you made a decision and it was the right decision. Number 2, Sandeep, maybe he's new to the organization, maybe he doesn't know the rules, that we don't do first class flights, it's just economy. You know what, Sandeep, I'm pretty sure you're never going to make that mistake again because that's a learning lesson. Now, it cost the organization 10 grand, but, well, 8 grand maybe, because obviously it would have cost you something anyway. So let's say it cost the organization 8 grand, but that is much cheaper than the cost of compliance for that policy for the next 20 years. Option 3, Sandeep is a terrible person and is defrauding the organization. Now, Sandeep, I know, is pretty clever, right? He's a smart cookie, right? If he wanted, I'm pretty sure he would know how to get around the approval systems. So you still have to audit anyway. And so this is what we call about audit-based governance versus approval-based governance. Now, Sandeep is not that. He's a great person. and probably wouldn't even make the mistake in the first place. But that's my point. Organizations build policies and procedures around lack of trust. Now, why am I talking about this when the question was about telcos? Because telcos, again, not in this report, in other research that we've done, score, while their leadership scores are good, while their psychological safety scores are good, their governance scores, their flexible operation scores are really, really bad. The processes and procedures in those organizations are so far behind, well, everybody else. Well, the tech firms, Netflix, right? And this is why the tech firms win, because they don't have to wait for 5 different layers of management to approve something. Someone is permitted to make that decision, and they do. And that's why often these young tech firms move so quickly, right? Is because they know how to delegate properly, right? And the systems of the organization promote the behaviors of the organization. So Vaishali, I hope that answers your question about telcos. Telcos score well on average, but more specifically, very badly in governance, but well in things like psychological safety and leadership. Again, that's an average. Individual telcos are different. Which telecom industries do you see towards? I cannot name individual companies. No, sorry. That is confident. Like in the same, I literally just said, it's like, I will ask you your company name for the research, but it's confidential. I cannot say it. There are companies that sometimes let us share information about them. So for example, I can talk about TW Telecom in the US because we have a case study in our library that names them, like publicly. I can talk about some of the other telcos in Europe that we have case studies on in our library because we have them named in our library. And I'll put a link in the chat very shortly with some of those case studies. But no, I can't name those companies. In general, I cannot and will not name companies who have taken part in our research, because then they won't take part in our research ever again. And some of them might actually get very angry with me.
Yes.
All right. So let me, yeah, I'm still sharing my screen. All right, so on average, global average, companies are doing okay when it comes to business agility. Just okay, not great. They are, there's a lot more that they should be doing that they're not. But you know what? This is actually pretty good, because year on year, this has been going up. Every year, average maturity, average improvements against these key indicators, key business agility measures, keeps going up. And again, that's an average. Some companies go down, but on average, they go up. We actually look at this, something like 26%, I think it is 26% of organizations have demonstrated some improvements over the last 5 years. Some organizations have gone backwards, yes, but on average, it's all going up, which that's kind of the direction you want them to see as an industry trend. And I'm sure we've all experienced those companies that go backwards. We know it happens. It's a shame, but on average, most companies around the world keep going up, which is good. That's very good. The other thing, so a couple of other sort of stats. I'm going to come back to that in a second. Very quickly, while most organizational transformations are led by senior executives or functional leaders, organizations where the transformation is being led by the board of directors or the C-suite have better scores. Right? And again, it comes from having a holistic or systemic view of business agility rather than just a functional view. Around the world, there is variation. Now, we saw a big shift around the COVID time. So North America decreased during COVID quite substantially and has come back to its pre-pandemic levels. Asia did the exact opposite. So we are seeing general trends across the world. Most countries is a bigger indicator of agility than region, but there are some regional variations as we see in companies around the world. That's completely expected, and places like Latin America definitely score quite weakly. Asia, which includes India, is definitely one of the highest scoring regions worldwide. And this has been a big increase since COVID, where one of the things which Asian companies responded incredibly well to COVID and sort of embraced the uncertainty really quickly. Everyone went into lockdown and companies had to adapt. So they had to invest in agility to adapt so quickly. Half of America kind of ignored the pandemic, and sadly, I actually know quite a few people who passed away because of that. But from a company standpoint, a lot of companies kind of just pretended it didn't exist. A lot of states just ignored the pandemic and it was business as usual. So they never had to adapt, right? Where a lot of Asian companies were forced to. And so in general, their ability to adapt, right, hasn't increased as fast as other regions around the world. Now that is, we don't ask companies for states, we just ask them what region they work in. We don't sort of go into what states they're in America. But other studies, which have, not ours, like other studies from other organizations, have looked at state-based influences on companies, and they have seen that there are distinguishing features between different states. Not our research, so I'm not an expert in that. It's just things that we've looked into as part of this. So just be aware. Those organizations who change the whole of the organization score higher than those that are changing only a couple of functions. By far, technology is the most common function to be transformed. That's not a surprise because agile usually starts in technology. But HR, 11% of organizations are transforming HR. 11% of organizations are transforming finance. 17% are transforming the PMO. This is good. Something like 12% are transforming the entire organization at once, right? Which is even better, because that's definitely what you want to see. And 25% are saying they're transforming multiple business functions. Again, we're talking business agility here with a capital B and a little a. And to be blunt, for those of you who are like agile coaches, business agility is not the same as agile business. Doing Scrum in finance, that doesn't work. But just taking agile outside IT is not doing business agility. It's not a bad thing. Like, you can definitely use many agile practices outside technology. Marketing is a great example of a function that can use agile practices really well. But we're talking about business agility, which is how the behaviors across an entire organization support or enable those capabilities I was talking about before. The ability to fund work dynamically, the ability to balance governance and risk, or to foster authentic relationships. That's what we're looking for. And those organizations that actually focus on this as a whole organization outperform those that focus just on a singular function, like just technology.
On this one, there was a very good observation. One person, when they look at it, they ask me this question. You know what? At one hand, you are asking us to think big and start small, and then here you are telling me go whole organization. And then the way you explained at the end, that basically summarizes it, right? So look at the capability holistically for the full organization. We are not asking them to run and then do agility for the entire 30,000 people or 15,000 in one go. So it's not about big bang, go do everything together. So I think that that is one of the interpretation of this slide, which we often get from the leaders. Ian, yeah.
So let me very quickly introduce Evan's theory of agile constraints. My daughter made me this Lego car specifically for this to explain this. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with theory of constraints comes from a book called The Goal by Eli Goldratt. It's about production systems. So theory of constraints says that in any system there's a constraint. Now let's say you're producing cars on a production line. If it takes you 5 minutes to install the engine and 4 minutes to install the wheels, those cars will roll off the production line once every 5 minutes. No amount of transformation of the of the wheel team is going to speed up the system. Right? You could get the wheel team down to 30 seconds and it makes no difference. Cars are rolling off once every 5 minutes. Now, the corollary to theory of constraints is that there is always a constraint. So let's say you do transform the engine team. Get the engine team down, you can install an engine now in 3 minutes. The constraint moves from the engine team now to the wheel team, because the wheel team was 4 minutes, if you remember. So those cars, even though the engine team is now 3 minutes, cars roll to production line only once every 4 minutes, because that's where the constraint is now. Evan's theory of agile constraints, with apologies to Eli Goldratt, an organization can only be as agile as its least agile function. And that's not technology anymore for most organizations. Yep. So back in 2003, when I started using agile, this was in technology. It used to take us 3 years to bring a product to market, to even get feedback from customers. We started using Scrum and XP, and we had 4 weekly sprints. This was 2003, so 4 weekly sprints were pretty good. Does that mean our agility went down from 3 years to 4 weeks? No, right? Because we had to wait for a release window to deploy to production. So every 4 weeks we were deploying to staging. So we got no customer feedback until that release window once every 6 months. Now, 6 months is better than 3 years, right? It's a lot better than 3 years, but it's not weekly. So that, so no amount of getting better. So our team could get better and better at doing Scrum and XP. We could do better retrospectives, but the system was not constrained by what we were doing anymore. It was constrained by operations. Now, I got out of technology around 2008, but around that same time, that's when things like DevOps emerges. Now, DevOps it creates agility in operations. Amazon can deploy every 11.3 seconds or whatever their statistic is. So pretend for a moment that that's where we still were. And our operations team started to deploy every 11 seconds. We had 4 weekly, 2 weekly sprints, deploy, so we have potentially shippable product increments every 2 weeks. We can deploy to production every 11 seconds. Does that mean our agility is measured in seconds or weeks? No, because the constraint moves. And that's where most organizations are today. They've invested in this agile transformation, and they've invested for deployment. They've got these technologies and these capabilities, but it takes them 4 months to get a hiring ticket, or 9 months to get a budget change approved. or 2 months to get through the change advisory board or the project control board. Right? The agility is not measured in weeks or seconds. It is still in months, because the system, the constraint to agility in the system, has moved outside of technology. And this is where, when we look at things like where organizations are transforming, one of the questions that we look at when we study individual companies, when we go deep into a company, is your transformational focus in the area of greatest constraint right now? Because it might have been the greatest constraint 2 years ago when you started, but you probably released that constraint within 6 to 12 months. If you keep investing the transformation in the same place, then you have reached a point of diminishing returns. You can make those teams better, right? But the system, your ability to get feedback from customers, your ability to deliver value to, I'm not sharing slides at the moment. The ability to deliver, so the ability to deliver value to customers, the ability to deliver, to adapt when something changes. If the constraints outside where all those wonderful coaches are, then someone in this organization is at some point going to go, what value is this agile transformation giving us? And you'll be hard to answer, because the truth is you achieved the maximum systems value last year. And unless the organization can move and focus the investment to the current constraints, I don't want to say it's not worth it, because obviously improvement is worth it nonetheless, but you're not going to see business agility. And so that's why when we're looking at that across the organization, it's not about transforming the organization all at once, but it is about understanding and focusing the investment on where the constraint is. And for most organizations, they release the constraint to agility in technology 6 years ago. 2015, 2016, like if you're doing agile back then and you're still doing agile, you still have coaches in technology, you're making teams better, but you're not making the system better. Again, your mileage may vary. Like your company, the constraints may still be technology, in which case, great, they're in the right place. Maybe you haven't done DevOps yet, and you still have to wait for a release window once every 6 months, in which case, great, that's where your constraint is. But for a lot of organizations, they've moved well past that. And this is where companies are trying to understand about business agility, because they want the agility, but they're not seeing it from their current transformations. Not because there's anything wrong with it, not because they're the wrong people, they're just in the wrong place. All right. Sorry, that was a sidetrack, but did that make sense?
Yes, it does. There is a question on the live LinkedIn Live. It is basically about, based on your experience, what is important? Is it the outcome or the path you take to achieve the outcomes?
That's a really good question. No one has ever asked me that. People have said is the outcome or the like things that you're doing and so forth. But we talk about business agility as a journey, and there are times when the learning along the way is more valuable than getting to the destination that you had in mind. So I think the path that you're on carries a lot of value, but I would still say the outcome is probably the most important thing there, for 2 reasons. One, your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss and the shareholders and the people who have the money, right, at some point are going to ask to see the return on investment. And you've got to be able to answer that question. And that's where telling them that you learnt along the way, most most leaders will value the learning, but that's not enough. They want to see the outcome as well. So you need to be able to show the business outcome alongside the path, alongside the learning you had along the way. Second reason is, and it goes to those capabilities. Agility is not the goal. The goal is what you can do with agility. So if you spend all your energy in getting better at agility, but never truly using it, never truly realizing it, then you may as well not do it. I'll give a real example. One of our members, they're based in Turkey. I was in Turkey late last year and we're having a good conversation with them. They're a very mature organization. They score very highly when it comes to agility. Their leaders, they are servant leaders. They are we have a case study of them in our library. They are really good. Now I'm not going to name them, even though they're in our library, because I'm going to say where their problems are. And what I'm about to say is confidential, so I'm not going to name them. But I just want to say that they're very good. The conversation I had with their CEO, their financial services organization, the conversation I had with their CEO was this. 2023, in Turkey, you are going to enter, there's an election year in Turkey. And this, by the way, is before the earthquake and everything else. This is last year, so obviously no one knew there was going to be an earthquake. I told the CEO, you have created all of this capability in your teams. They're empowered. You've delegated to them. They work autonomously. The engagement is high. The adaptability, the ability to adapt is high. Your customers love you, which is great. But you're about to go through an election cycle in an autocratic country where, let's just say, the transition of power is unlikely to go smoothly. Again, pre-earthquake, the world is different now as of a couple of weeks ago, but at the time, it's like, look, autocratic, unlikely to be a smooth transition of power. Your inflation rates are something like 120%, right? Insane. And you're a financial services company. You're exposed, right? You've got a workforce that's empowered. If you don't use that empowerment to draw new ideas, to innovate, to be able to serve your customers when the inflation rate keeps going up, when the handover of power is not smooth and there is disruption to Turkey as a country, if there's disruption to Turkey as a country, if you can't use that autonomy and that empowerment that you've created in those teams, then it was a waste of your time in creating it in the first place. Right? And so using the agility is more important than the creation of it. Now you've got to create it to use it, but if you never use it, and this was my point, it's you've got it, now use it, otherwise all those engagement scores are meaningless. So now the CEO listened to me and she had some good feedback and we had a good conversation about this. And now, of course, there's an entirely different disruption happening across Turkey that they're responding to. But again, because the teams can work autonomously, it's easier for them to deal with something as disruptive as well, a major earthquake, which is truly disrupting that country. Their infrastructure is wrecked. So yes, that's sort of one of the key points here.
Perfect.
We've got a couple of minutes left. I want to share one thing and then sort of see if there are any final questions. So I mentioned a moment ago or earlier that business agility is it's not all easy. Now, these are the challenges, the top, so now I'm sharing my slides. These are the top challenges that organizations identified on the journey towards business agility. Now, whilst culture and mindset are there, I will note that many of these are cultural challenges or mindset challenges. Culture and mindset are listed separately at the bottom just because these are people saying that they had a challenge with culture. They weren't specific as to what elements of culture, it's just culture was a challenge. When we look at these, resistance to change and leadership, like a lot of these are also leadership challenges. Again, leadership is a specific line, it's the second highest, but leadership is the one that breaks through resistance to change. Leaders are the ones who develop employee engagement. So even though leaders being a challenge was a line, leaders have a responsibility for almost all of these, if not all of them. Now, the report itself has some recommendations of what organizations can do to address some of these challenges. I don't have time to go through this, so and hopefully most of you have seen or at least can download the report. Again, I'll put a link in the chat. But please understand that we're talking about a cultural and behavioral change. And if you remember what I said at the very beginning, to the very first question, when I went off on my first tangent around motivation, the best form of motivation is to align what you're doing with someone's intrinsic, internal motivation. What matters to them? Don't make agility matter to them. Link agility to what already matters to them. And that's how you're going to break through most of that resistance to change and most of the, a lot of the leadership problems and leadership buy-in problems that you get. The second element around unsuitable practices and processes, that goes to my earlier point about governance and the example I gave around the travel policy. You need to start working with teams in your organization to develop governance processes and practices that promote agility rather than work against agility. I'll give you another real example that comes up in lots and lots of organizations. Right? Most organizations promote collaboration. Right? I hope your organization is promoting collaboration. Maybe they even restructure around squads and tribes and create cross-functional, multidisciplinary teams. All great, right? We want to behave with collaboration. Fantastic. But then it comes to the end of the year. And it's like, Sandeep, sorry, I'm going to give you a 2. And Balaji, I'm going to give you a 3. I'm sorry, I don't have enough 3s to give everybody. I'd give you all a 3 if I could, but I just don't have enough 3s. What do you think happens to collaboration then? Right? Sandeep is going to be very rightly pissed. It's like, I did the same work as Balaji. Like, we were working on the same outcome. We worked collaboratively. And my authority as a leader disappears. My ability to ask them to collaborate disappears. And next year, we're going to get a whole bunch of competitive behavior because Sandeep wants his 3, so he gets his bonus or gets the larger bonus, all because the organization's performance management system is geared to incentivize individuals and individual work rather than gearing it to incentivize collaboration. And therein lies a problem. If you want to incentivize collaboration, sorry, if you want to behave with collaboration, but you incentivize individual work, there's a misalignment there. And pretty much every organization has this problem. So do have a look through the recommendations and the challenges. It touches on a lot of these. I've just sort of highlighted what I think are some of the key points there. And maybe let's just take 5 minutes left and take some time to go. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I just put one of the comments. One of the favorite sections of the report is the recommendations. And the thing that I like about it, it is put in a very subtle way, But it's really very effective and powerful thinking, right? Especially for coaches who haven't read the report yet. My urge is to go download the report and then if not everything, at least look at the recommendation and challenges, because that's where you will thrive. It's like a ready recipe for you to take it. I wouldn't say it creates or tells you the how, but at least it can give you the what you can focus on, and from there you can build your story up and at least try to create awareness in your organization around what can we do about this challenge, and then co-create it, the co-create the how part with whosoever you're working with. So I think that's my kind of the greatest part. That's the area where I go to every time I go to, and it's very nicely done.
So I've just put in the chat a link to the business agility report. We haven't formally launched the 2023 business agility report yet. Those capabilities I showed you is the latest version of domains of business agility. That was released in December. Now, part of the changes based on those new capabilities and domains is we are creating a new version of the business agility report. Now, we have some draft questions that we are testing, and I put the link for that in the chat. There's an access code, BAR 2023. I will ask you only click on English because it's actually not being translated into those other languages. I'll also note that this is a temporary platform to host the survey. It's not where we want it to be. I'm not looking for feedback. Like, if there are issues with the platform, sure, let me know so that I know. But this is a draft of what the questions are going to look like based around those new capabilities. So if you've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes to have a look at those, please have a look at the click on that link, take those 5-10 minutes, and share your insights on the latest and greatest from your organization, and let's see where it goes from there.
Thank you very much, Evan. Thank you. Yeah, definitely. And I see the URL is fancy this time, certifiedagile.org.
Yeah, I spoke about the profile, which is the when you do like an analysis of a company. This is the platform we used as part of the that organizational certification. It's not designed for what we're testing here, which is why it's not going to be quite perfect. But this is the platform as part of that organizational evaluation.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, perfect. All right, so I think we are just 2 minutes on the time. With that, let me quickly say a vote of thanks to all those who have joined. I hope you can see my screen. This is something that both me and Evan cherished, I would say, in every of our presentations during our work together. And this is something that is stick with me. So yeah, I strongly believe that we have to adopt to change in order not just to survive but also to thrive and grow. And I think that's the motto that we want to carry forward with this. So all the work that has been done on the business agility report, I mean, you might want to see the report and then you can see 35 pages of insights in front of you, but the amount of effort that takes to create that kind of insights is huge. So thank you to Evan and the entire team. And one of the things that stands out for this report, it is really unbiased. It is not associated with either an organization or a framework or any sales pitch. So that's why we love what you do, Evan, in Business Agility Institute. And we wish 2023 to be a much better year for every one of us. And thank you very much for time today. To all the participants and to yourself, Evan.
No, thank you. It's whenever you need, I'm here for you. So I appreciate it, and thank you for the questions and the dialogue. So I hope it was helpful.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. We will end the session now. Have a good one, everybody.